Real quick though, in case you were dropped by yesterday and were like, or you watched like the replay from yesterday and me struggling with the dependencies library, or like how to construct dependencies using like inside TCA, the Composable Architecture. Today I figured out how I wanted to like structure my dependency for core data. Instead of using like a show manager, I no longer really have to do that. I can do everything from my core data client. And that was the point. So in this dependency key, I have a few things here for this core data client. I have a provider, a container, a view context, a background context, a save show, and then a fetched shows property. So the save show, as you can tell, is a closure, and it'll just take in a show object, turn it into an entity, and then save it inside core data. Then I have now going from top to bottom, I have a provider, which is just this storage provider. It just gives me access to the like shared or the preview section as I need to. And the reason why I created like a provider separately is because there's a couple functions I wrote, like the add object to show function that I wrote that can work on like the background context. And the same with like fetching a specific show file can work on any context at this point. So that kind of thing happens. And that's why I wanted access to the provider so I can get access to those like extension functions, helper functions that I wrote. I'm not too sure if I need the container yet because this is just an NS persistent container. I'm not quite positive that I need it, especially because I've gotten the view context and a new background context in here. And so the contexts allow you to like save, fetch, do the operations on core data itself. And then I have a fetched shows property, which is just the show entity, which allows me to fetch shows from the different providers. So whether I'm using the live storage provider or I'm using the preview storage provider. So inside storage provider, I have this like shared, which is live. And the initializer just says whether you're in memory or not. And if you're in memory, then you use like the internal tool. So this would be for like testing and previews and stuff like that. And if you're not in memory, if you're live, then you want to use the persistent stores itself. And so when you're inside a preview, so like when you're in memory, this is the only time you go into memory is when you're inside a preview. Or like testing, for example, but I only have it set up for preview. I call it preview. Then I generate a few test shows and some test objects. These could be a lot more random, but they're not right now. And that just allows me to have data inside my preview. So how does this work actually with the dependency? Because like how it's supposed to work with the core data, with the dependency library, is you have a dependency key, which is this core data client. So that's what I get to call inside the property wrapper at dependency. And then I have all these options basically on top of the core data client. Then I also have dependency values. And this is like that key value path to grab the core data itself, right? So a dependency is broken up into like 3 different options here. You have and not 3 different options, but you have to have 3 different values for the core, for a dependency. You have to have the live value, so what's used actually inside the app. You have to have the preview value, which is very useful. I guess you don't have to, but that's what's the most useful in like SwiftUI to get those canvases working. And then you have to have a test value so that when you run tests, you can actually use them. And then you create this like the static value off of your core data, off of your struct that depends on that dependency key. And then what this library does is it basically determines where you are and it grabs that value and that's what it's going to use. So I'm just going to open these up side by side real quick. So here we have the client itself, And then this is the live value. So this is going to be whenever I run the app, and whenever I run it in the simulator or or on device. So in the live values here, here's my provider. So it just calls the storage provider. Here's the container. Here's the view, this very specific view context. And then the new background context. It generates a new background context, I believe, when called. I could be wrong about that one. Then I have the save show function here. And again, it's using that shared provider. So it's calling the live value. It's calling it's calling the NS CloudKit container that's on my device. Cool. So this is how this kind of like works. It just calls the save show. And then we have a fetched show here that does it on the view context, because this will be used to actually influence like the actual view of the show, the actual view itself. So you want to do that on the main thread in core data. So fetch shows always just calls on the view context. Now, like my preview and my test, they pretty much look the same, but my preview file, which is what allows me to use this on like I was saying, SwiftUI previews. We're first going to get to the storage provider. We're going to go to that preview though. So on the initializer inside storage provider, we have that private init here, and it says in memory boolean equals false. So it just tells us where we're going to get that persistent store. Then we have that container, that view context, the new background context. Again, I just generate these so I can use them off the cuff if I want to inside the app anywhere. Again, it's the same thing it's the exact same thing that you would call inside the live. So they're the same values here in the dependency. You're just overriding how they should act based on the environment that you're in. So because we're in the preview environment, we're going off of preview here. And then same with fetch shows, we're going off of preview and that kind of thing. And then test looks exactly the same, because those are the values that we would test over. Oh, actually, these are all shared, and that's not what it should be. These should be preview, so I thought I was explaining it. Preview. Cool. In theory, I should actually put like an @dependency controller here, so that I get the actual, it should be so that I can get the UUID generated like correctly, because it's a dependency. And same with date created and date last modified. Those should be dependencies to truly use this library correctly, but we'll just, again, leaving it for now. But yeah, so that's how that kind of breaks down. Now, if I wanted to use this dependency, I did it in iHog store. We can see here. So I have this @dependency, the core data, which is what was inside the core data client. So this dependency value, it created that variable and that extension, and then we call the key path to get to that core data. And then off of core data, I can do a bunch of things now. So inside here, on up here, we can see immediately I'm going to call state.shows equals core data.fetchShows. And then I do a little map to go to a show object instead of the show entity. And then same with in here, I just do a core data.saveShow. It saves the show. And notice I pass in that new background context. And actually, we could pass in, instead of core data.new container.new background context, we can do data. Whoa, can we type? Maybe. Dot new background context, and that's gonna give me that background context right here. So it'll go based off of whatever's generated here, and that should still work. We'll make sure it does actually right now. If I go here, I hit the show. 01, 21, 12, 12. Save. And it's still, there's no errors or anything. It's still here. And if I run this again, replace, we'll see that it's still, the show file is still valid. It's still right there, which is neat. So it's using this dependency key here. And then what's also cool is inside content view, because I brought in my previews back, what we'll see is when I open this canvas, it's now going to use it's going to use that preview state of the dependency. Because now we have those 10 shows. They're not alphabetized or anything. And if I hit add, and everything should work at this point. So 1, 12, or not 12, 21, save. And there we go. And now it's there. And I can basically do everything else that was on my same thing before. Which is pretty neat.